My older sister dumped her baby on my doorstep, then disappeared. My parents said, "The baby is your burden now." 15 years later, they sued me for custody, claiming I kept them apart. But when I handed the judge a sealed folder, his eyes widened. Then he asked, "Do they even know what you have?" I just nodded and got ready to speak. The morning Maya asked me why she didn't have grandparents at her school play, I told her they lived far away. It wasn't entirely a lie. Distance isn't always measured in miles. She was 7 then, wearing a cotton dress I'd sewn myself because money was tight and I'd learned to make things work. She'd played a sunflower in the spring production, one line, spoken too quietly for most of the auditorium to hear, but I'd recorded every second on my phone and watched it 17 times that night after she fell asleep. But Chloe's grandma drove 4 hours, Maya said, her small fingers working at a knot in her shoelace, and Jaden's grandpa flew on a plane from Florida. I knelt beside her on the gymnasium floor, surrounded by the chaos of parents collecting children and teachers dismantling cardboard props. The smell of tempera paint and fruit punch hung in the air. I remember thinking how strange it was that such an ordinary moment could carry so much weight. Some families are different, I said. Some families are smaller, but that doesn't mean there's less love. Sometimes there's more, because it has fewer places to go. She considered this with the seriousness that only children possess. Then she nodded, satisfied for the moment, and asked if we could get ice cream on the way home. I said yes. I almost always said yes to ice cream. The story doesn't start there, of course. Stories never really start where we think they do. If I trace it back, I could begin the night Danielle showed up at my apartment, the cramped studio I was renting while I finished my last year of nursing school. I was 23, exhausted, surviving on coffee and determination. I hadn't seen my older sister in almost 2 years. But even that wasn't the beginning. The beginning was further back, in the particular architecture of our family, in the roles we were assigned before we understood what roles meant. Danielle was the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who could walk into any room and make it feel like a party had just started. She had our mother's high cheekbones and our father's easy confidence. And from the time she was small, the world seemed to arrange itself around her comfort. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades and cleaned up messes and learned early that my value in the family economy was tied to usefulness. I don't say this with bitterness, not anymore. It's simply the truth, the way you might note that the sky is blue or that water flows downhill. Our parents loved Danielle with the kind of a love that's easy, admiring, indulgent, proud. They loved me with the kind of love that expects, steady, conditional, rooted in function. When Danielle got pregnant at 24, our parents were disappointed but not devastated. These things happened. The father, a man named Marcus, who Danielle had been seeing for 6 months, was presentable enough. He had a job in pharmaceutical sales, a nice car, a smile that showed too many teeth. They got engaged. Our mother started planning a wedding. When I announced I'd been accepted to nursing school, our father nodded and asked if I'd applied for financial aid. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because you need to understand the foundation on which everything else was built. The night Danielle appeared at my door, I almost didn't recognize her. It was February, bitter cold, and she was wearing a thin jacket and no gloves. Her mascara had run. Her lips were chapped and bitten. She was holding a car seat. In the car seat was a baby. "I need you to watch her," Danielle said, not asked, said. I stood in the doorway, trying to process the scene before me. The baby was wrapped in a pink blanket, sleeping with the particular piece of infants who haven't yet learned that the world can be unkind. She had Danielle's dark hair already curling at the ends. "For how long?" I asked, because it was the only question that formed. "Just for a little while. Few days, a week maybe. I need to—" Danielle's voice cracked. She pressed her palm against her forehead, and I saw that her hand was trembling. "Marcus left 3 weeks ago. He just left. He's in Chicago with some woman he met at a conference, and I can't do this, Nora. I can't do any of this. Have you called Mom and Dad?" Something shifted in Danielle's face. A door closing. "They have their own problems. Dad's business. You know how stressed they've been." I didn't. Actually, I'd been too busy with clinicals and night shifts at the hospital to keep up with the details of my parents' lives. But I knew in some cellular way that Danielle wasn't telling me the whole truth. You need to come inside, I said. It's freezing. We can figure this out. I can't stay. Danielle was already stepping backward, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past my shoulder. I just need a few days to get my head straight, to make a plan. You're good at this, Nora. You're good at taking care of things. The car seat was in my hands before I realized she'd given it to me. The weight of it, the dense, terrifying weight of a living child, pressed against my forearms. Danielle, wait! But she was already walking down the hall, her thin jacket flapping, her shoulders hunched against cold I couldn't protect her from. She didn't look back. I stood in my doorway with a sleeping infant in my arms and watched my sister's silhouette disappear around the corner. And some part of me understood, even then, even in my shock and confusion, that I was watching her leave for good. The baby's name, I learned from the birth certificate tucked into the diaper bag, was Maya Rose. She was 6 weeks old. I called my parents the next morning after a sleepless night of feedings and diaper changes and the particular terror of being solely responsible for something so fragile. My studio apartment had transformed overnight into a landscape of unfamiliar needs, bottles that required sterilizing, formula that had to be mixed at precise temperatures, a tiny body that needed constant vigilance. My mother answered on the fourth ring. Nora, what is it? I'm about to leave for my tennis lesson. Danielle left Maya with me last night. She said she needed a few days, but I can't. Mom, I'm in school. I have clinicals 3 days a week. I can't take care of a baby. The pause on the other end of the line was long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. She left the baby with you? Yes, she seemed upset. She said Marcus left her, that she couldn't handle things. She looked, I searched for the right word, fragile. Mom, she looked fragile. My mother exhaled slowly. I heard the sound of her setting something down, car keys maybe, or her purse. Your sister has always been dramatic. This is probably just one of her phases. She'll be back in a few days when she's calmed down. And in the meantime, what am I supposed to do? You're studying to be a nurse, aren't you? Consider it practice. The words landed like stones. I sat on the edge of my twin bed, Maya sleeping in her car seat beside me, and tried to understand what my mother was saying. Mom, I can't miss class. I can't miss work. My scholarship, Nora. My mother's voice sharpened. Your sister is going through a difficult time. We've all had to make sacrifices for this family. This is yours. What about you? What about Dad? She's your granddaughter. Another pause. Longer this time. Your father and I aren't in a position to take on a baby right now. You know the business has been struggling. The stress would be too much. And frankly, we're not the ones Danielle chose to trust with this. She came to you? There it was, the slight emphasis on that final word. The implication that I should feel honored, chosen, elevated by my sister's abandonment. That this was an opportunity rather than a burden. Mom, this isn't fair. Fair? My mother laughed, but there was no warmth in it. When has life ever been fair, Nora? You're the responsible one. You always have been. So be responsible. She hung up. I sat in my cramped studio apartment with my sister's infant daughter, and I realized that no one was coming to help me. No cavalry would arrive. No family would step forward. I had been given a child the way you might be given a package you didn't order. Unexpectedly, inconveniently, with no return address. I looked at Maya. She was awake now, her dark eyes fixed on some point above my head, her tiny fists waving in the air. She didn't know that she'd been abandoned. She didn't know that her mother was gone, that her grandparents had refused her, that her entire future now rested in the hands of a 23-year-old nursing student who didn't know the first thing about raising a child. She just knew she was hungry. So I made a bottle. I fed her. I changed her diaper. I held her against my chest and felt her small body relax into sleep. And I began. The first year was the hardest. I don't know how else to describe it. My memories of that time exist in fragments. The gray exhaustion that never fully lifted, the creative mathematics of stretching every dollar, the constant negotiation between Maya's needs and my own survival. I nearly failed one of my courses. My clinical supervisor pulled me aside to ask if I was sleeping. I took on extra shifts at the hospital cafeteria, working nights while a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a retired schoolteacher who became my salvation, watched Maya for a rate I could barely afford. Danielle didn't call, didn't write. didn't appear at my door again. For the first 3 months, I kept expecting her to return, to burst back into our lives with apologies and explanations and outstretched arms. I rehearsed conversations in my head while I folded tiny onesies. I imagined the relief I would feel when I could hand Maya back, return to my own life, become just an aunt instead of everything. But the months passed, and Danielle remained gone. My parents offered occasional updates when I called. She was in Arizona, she was in New Mexico, she was finding herself. But they never suggested she might return for her daughter. They never asked how Maya was doing. They never offered to help. By the time Maya turned 1, I had stopped expecting anything from any of them. I graduated nursing school 6 months late, walking across the stage with a toddler on my hip. Because Mrs. Patterson had come down with the flu, and I couldn't afford another babysitter. The dean paused, clearly uncertain how to proceed, and then handed me my diploma with an expression that fell somewhere between confusion and reluctant admiration. I got a job at a pediatric clinic. It didn't pay as well as hospital work, but the hours were predictable and they let me adjust my schedule around Maya's daycare. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was safe enough, affordable enough. I learned to cut Maya's hair myself, to patch her clothes, to transform grocery store cake mix into birthday creations that she believed were homemade. I learned to be a mother. Not because I'd chosen it, not because I'd planned it, but because Maya needed one, and there was no one else. People sometimes ask me if I resented her, Maya, I mean. If some part of me looked at this child who had upended my life and felt anger or regret or the suffocating weight of opportunity cost. The honest answer is complicated. In the beginning, yes. There were nights when Maya wouldn't stop crying, when I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a row, when I looked at my former classmates on social media, traveling, dating, building careers, without the anchor of a child, and felt something dark and shameful coil in my chest. There were moments when I resented not just the circumstances, but Maya herself, as if she had chosen to be born, as if she had orchestrated her own abandonment. But children have a way of dissolving resentment. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that love does. The first time Maya said my name, Nora, not Mama because I hadn't known what I wanted her to call me, I felt something unlock in my chest. She was 13 months old, sitting in her high chair covered in mashed banana, and she looked at me with those serious dark eyes and said, Nora, as clearly as if she'd been practicing for weeks. I cried. I stood in my kitchen and cried while she stared at me with infant bewilderment, and something shifted in the foundation of who I was becoming. She wasn't my burden. She wasn't my sacrifice. She was my daughter in every way that mattered, and I loved her with a ferocity that still surprises me. Eventually, she started calling me Mom. I don't remember exactly when the switch happened, maybe around age 3, but one day it was just natural, unremarkable, as if it had always been that way. I didn't correct her. I didn't explain. I simply answered to the name she'd given me. Years passed the way years do when you're deep in the work of raising a child. Slowly in the living, quickly in the remembering. Maya started kindergarten, lost her first tooth, learned to ride a bike, had nightmares about monsters under her bed. Made her first friend, a girl named Chloe, whose family would become something like extended family to us. Developed a passion for drawing that filled our apartment with sketchbooks and colored pencils and pictures taped to every available surface. I dated occasionally, though nothing lasted. The logistics were complicated, and my heart wasn't in it. There was a physical therapist named David who stuck around for almost a year, who was kind to Maya and patient with my schedule, but eventually he wanted more than I could give him. He wanted a family of his own, and I already had one. I didn't tell Maya about Danielle, not the full story. When she was old enough to ask questions, I told her that her birth mother had loved her very much, but hadn't been able to take care of her. That sometimes grown-ups made choices that were hard to understand, that I had chosen to be her mom, and that was the most important choice I'd ever made. She accepted this with the adaptability of children. Sometimes she asked more questions. Where was her birth mother now? Did she ever think about Maya? Would she come back someday? And I answered as honestly as I could, while protecting her from the sharper edges of the truth. I didn't tell her that I hadn't heard from Danielle in years. I didn't tell her that our parents had essentially erased her from their lives, mentioning her only in passing when I called on holidays, never asking for pictures, never sending birthday cards. I didn't tell her about the box I kept in my closet, the one with Danielle's letters from the first few months, the ones that had arrived sporadically and then stopped entirely, full of vague apologies and promises that never materialized. I didn't tell her about the other documents in that box, the ones I'd started collecting without fully understanding why, the ones that would become, years later, the contents of a sealed folder. Some truths are too heavy for children to carry. I carried them for her in my closet, in my memory, in the hollow space behind my ribs where anger used to live. My parents and I maintained what I suppose you could call a relationship, though the word feels too generous. We exchanged birthday cards, Christmas greetings, the occasional phone call that never lasted more than 10 minutes. They knew about Maya. They couldn't not know. But they treated her existence the way you might treat an inconvenient piece of furniture in a room you rarely enter. Acknowledged, but ignored. Present, but unimportant. They never visited. Never sent gifts. Never asked to video chat or see pictures. When I sent them photos of Maya's school performances or birthday parties, they responded with brief texts, cute or nice, and changed the subject. I told myself it didn't matter. Maya had me. She had Mrs. Patterson, who had become Grandma Patterson by mutual agreement. She had Chloe's family, who included her in holiday dinners and weekend outings. She had a community of people who showed up for her, who loved her, who chose her. She didn't need grandparents who had never wanted her. But sometimes, late at night, when Maya was asleep and I was alone with my thoughts, I wondered what it would feel like to have family who actually functioned like family, who called just to check in, who wanted to be part of our lives, who saw Maya not as a burden or an embarrassment, but as the extraordinary person she was becoming. I wondered what it would feel like not to be so tired all the time. Not the physical tiredness that I'd learned to manage, but the emotional exhaustion of doing everything alone, of being the only person standing between my daughter and the chaos of a world that hadn't asked for her. Those nights, I let myself grieve the family I'd never had. And then I got up the next morning and made pancakes and helped Maya with her homework and reminded myself that I was building something better, something real. Danielle reappeared when Maya was 9. I was at work, the pediatric clinic where I'd been promoted to charge nurse, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. I'd learned to be suspicious of unknown calls, trained by years of student loan collectors and spam marketers, but something made me pick up. Nora? The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakably my sister's. I stepped into an empty exam room and closed the door. Danielle, where are you? I'm in California, Santa Barbara. I've been here for a few years now. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. I'm getting married. The words didn't immediately compute. I stood in that sterile room with its pediatric growth charts and cartoon characters on the walls, and I tried to connect the woman on the phone to the sister who had left a baby on my doorstep and vanished. Married, I repeated. His name is Brian. He's a good man. He runs a vineyard. It's Nora. My life is finally good. I'm finally in a good place. I waited. I could feel the other part of this conversation approaching, the reason she'd called after 8 years of silence. I've been thinking about Maya, Danielle said. Her voice softened, took on the particular quality of someone rehearsing words they've practiced. I know I wasn't there, but I'm different now. Brian knows about her, about everything, and he's supportive. He thinks it would be good for me to reconnect, to be part of her life. The room felt smaller. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. You want to see her, I said. I want to know her. I want her to know me. Not, Danielle rushed on. Not to replace you. I know you've raised her. I know you've been her mother, but I'm still hurt. I'm still biologically. She trailed off, unable or unwilling to say the word. You're still her biological mother, I finished. Yes. I closed my eyes. I thought about Maya, about the questions she'd started asking more frequently, now that she was old enough to understand the complexities of our situation. Where is she? Does she ever think about me? Would she want to meet me? I thought about what it would do to Maya to suddenly have Danielle in her life, the hope it might create, the potential for disappointment. I thought about my own anger, still present after all these years, banked like coals but never fully extinguished. I need to think about this, I said. This isn't just about you, Danielle. Maya is a person. She has feelings and needs and a life that you haven't been part of. I can't just, I know. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that I'm here, that I'm ready when you are, when Maya is. She gave me her number, her address, her email. She told me about her life in Santa Barbara, the vineyard, the ocean, the man who loved her, despite knowing everything she'd done. She spoke with the fluency of someone who had crafted a narrative about her past, who had found a way to tell her story that cast her as the protagonist rather than the villain. I listened without responding. When she finished, I said I would be in touch and hung up. Then I sat in that exam room for 10 minutes, staring at a poster about hand washing, trying to understand what I felt. I didn't tell Maya. Not right away. I spent weeks wrestling with the decision, running through scenarios in my mind. Maya meeting Danielle and feeling instantly connected. Maya meeting Danielle and feeling abandoned all over again. Danielle promising involvement and then disappearing. Danielle staying, becoming part of our lives, complicating the family structure we'd built. I consulted with a child psychologist, a colleague at the clinic, who asked careful questions about Maya's emotional stability, her understanding of her own history, her capacity to process complicated information. She's remarkably well adjusted, the psychologist said, reviewing the notes I'd shared. That's a testament to the environment you've created for her, but reunification with a birth parent is always complex. There's no way to predict how she'll respond. So what do? You prepare her. You give her information in age-appropriate ways. You let her have some agency in the decision, while also protecting her from choices she's not ready to make. And you remember that your job isn't to engineer a perfect outcome. It's to support her through whatever comes. I started the conversation that weekend. Slowly, carefully, in the language I'd developed for explaining hard things to Maya. Your birth mother called me, I said. She lives in California now. She's getting married. She asked if she could get to know you. Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, working on a sketch of a dragon. Her pencil paused, mid-stroke. She called? Yes, a few weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? I heard the edge in her voice. Not quite anger, but something approaching it. Because I needed time to think. And because I wanted to talk to you when I was ready, not when I was still figuring out how I felt. Maya set down her pencil. Her expression was unreadable, the way children's expressions often are when they're processing information they don't know how to feel about. Do you want me to meet her? I want whatever's best for you. And I don't know what that is. I think maybe you have to help me figure it out. She was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed with its radio playing something indistinct. I want to meet her, Maya said finally. But I don't want things to change. With us, I mean. You're my mom. That doesn't change. That never changes, I said. No matter what. I arranged a video call for the following weekend. I sat beside Maya while she talked to Danielle for the first time, watched my daughter navigate a conversation with the woman who had given birth to her and then left. Danielle cried. Maya did not. She asked practical questions. Where did Danielle live? What did she do? Did she have pets? She spoke with the polite caution of someone meeting a stranger at a party, not the raw emotion of a reunion. Afterwards, she said she didn't need to talk about it. She went to her room and drew for 3 hours. The calls continued sporadically over the next few months. Sometimes Maya was eager. Sometimes she declined, saying she had homework or wasn't in the mood. I let her set the pace, as the psychologist had advised. Danielle visited once when Maya was 10. She flew in for a weekend, stayed at a hotel downtown, and we arranged a dinner at a neutral restaurant. She brought gifts, expensive ones, the kind I couldn't afford, and talked too much and laughed too loudly and seemed desperate for Maya to like her. Maya was polite but distant. She thanked Danielle for the presents. She answered questions about school and her drawings and her favorite subjects. But she didn't reach for connection the way Danielle seemed to want her to. After dinner, while Maya was in the bathroom, Danielle turned to me with wet eyes. She doesn't even know me, she said. She looks at me like I'm a stranger. You are a stranger, I said. I didn't mean it cruelly, but I didn't soften it either. You can't disappear for 9 years and expect to be family. I know. I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying now. Doesn't that count for something? It counts, I said, but it's not a magic eraser. It doesn't undo the years. It doesn't undo the fact that you left and I stayed. That I was the one who held her when she was sick and taught her to read and stayed up all night when she had nightmares. Those things happened, Danielle. They're real. She didn't have an answer to that. Maya came back from the bathroom, and we finished the meal in strained silence. After that weekend, Danielle's calls became less frequent. Once a month, then once every few months. She cited wedding planning, work at the vineyard, the busy rhythms of her new life. Maya didn't seem to mind. She mentioned Danielle occasionally, the way you might mention a distant relative you'd met once at a reunion, but she didn't ask about her or initiate contact. I thought, perhaps naively, that this was how things would remain. A biological mother on the periphery, acknowledged but not central. A family structure that worked even if it wasn't traditional. But I had underestimated the other players in this story, the ones who had been silent for so long that I'd almost forgotten they had the capacity to speak. The letter arrived on a Tuesday when Maya was 14. I recognized the law firm's letterhead before I opened it, recognized the particular kind of expensive stationery that signals serious business. I stood at my mailbox in the fading afternoon light and read the words once, twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of what they said. My parents, Michael and Sandra Turner, were seeking legal custody of Maya Rose Turner. They were alleging that I had unlawfully withheld their grandchild from them for 14 years. They were claiming that my guardianship, never formally established through the courts, was illegitimate. They were asking a judge to remove Maya from my care and place her with them. I sat on my front steps, the letter in my hands, and felt the ground shift beneath me. The letter continued with legal language I didn't fully understand. Terms like parens patriae and best interests of the child and de facto parent. But the core message was clear. My parents wanted Maya. After 14 years of silence, they wanted her. And Danielle's signature was on the petition as well. I called a lawyer that evening after Maya was in bed. Her name was Patricia Walsh, and she'd been recommended by a colleague whose own custody battle had ended favorably. She was direct, practical, and expensive, but she didn't sugarcoat. This is going to be a fight, she said. Your parents have resources. They're claiming that you essentially kidnapped their grandchild. They're saying Danielle never intended for the placement to be permanent, that she was in crisis and you took advantage. That's a lie. I believe you. But belief isn't evidence. Do you have documentation? Anything that proves Danielle abandoned Maya, that your parents refused to help, that you've been her sole caregiver by necessity rather than manipulation? I thought about the box in my closet, the letters, the documents I'd gathered over the years without fully understanding why: bank statements, medical records, correspondence, recordings of phone calls I'd made when I was too exhausted to trust my own memory. I have things, I said. I didn't know I was collecting evidence. I kept records in case. In case of what? I paused, searching for an answer I hadn't consciously formulated. In case someday I needed to prove what really happened. In case someone tried to take her away. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Bring me everything. We'll go through it together, and we'll build the strongest case we can." The discovery phase was brutal. My parents' lawyers requested records going back 15 years. They wanted financial documents, school records, medical records, correspondence with Danielle, testimony from anyone who had witnessed my systematic alienation of Maya from her biological family. I provided what was requested while Patricia built our counter-narrative. We gathered testimony from Mrs. Patterson, who remembered the day Danielle had left and the weeks that followed. We obtained records from Maya's school, documenting years of parent-teacher conferences attended by me alone. We compiled medical records showing every well-child visit, every vaccination, every emergency room trip where I had been listed as the responsible adult, and I told Patricia about the box. "Some of this is damaging to them," she said, flipping through the pages I'd organized. The letters from Danielle explicitly stating she couldn't care for Maya. The record of your call to your parents, where your mother refused to take the baby. But some of this, she paused, holding up a particular document. "Where did you get this?" Danielle left her email logged in on my computer once, during that visit when Maya was 10. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And I found things. Patricia studied the printouts, emails between Danielle and my mother spanning years, discussions about Maya that I'd never been part of, plans I hadn't known existed. "This changes things," Patricia said slowly. "This isn't just about who raised Maya. This is about why. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in March, 5 months after the initial petition. Maya was 15 by then, old enough under state law to have her preference considered by the court. She knew about the lawsuit. I hadn't been able to hide it from her, and the psychologist had advised that secrecy would be more damaging than honesty. I'd explained, as carefully as I could, that her grandparents were asking a judge to decide where she should live. "But I want to live with you," she'd said, her voice carrying the particular indignation of teenagers who can't believe adults could be so stupid. "Why would anyone think I'd want to live with people I've never even met?" "I don't know, sweetheart. The courts have to figure these things out. Sometimes families disagree and judges have to decide what's best. What's best is that I stay with my mom. That's obvious." I'd held her then, my tall, gangly 15-year-old who still fit perfectly in my arms, and I'd made her a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that happens." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled, fluorescent lit, smelling faintly of old coffee and anxiety. My parents sat on one side with their legal team, my father in a suit I recognized from my childhood, my mother in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Danielle was beside them, looking nervous, avoiding my eyes. I sat on the other side with Patricia. Maya was in a waiting room with a court-appointed advocate, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, who would speak to her preferences and needs. The judge was a man in his 60s named Morrison, with gray hair and a demeanor that suggested he'd seen too many families tear themselves apart in rooms like this one. He reviewed the documents before him while we all waited in silence. "This is an unusual case," he said finally. "We have a child who has lived with one caregiver for her entire life, and biological family members who are now seeking custody after a period of—" He checked his notes. 15 years with minimal contact. My father's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client's position is that Ms. Turner unlawfully obtained custody of their grandchild and has systematically prevented them from having a relationship." "I've read the briefs," Judge Morrison interrupted. "I'm not interested in prepared statements. I want to understand what actually happened here." He turned to me. "Ms. Turner, you've been raising Maya since she was 6 weeks old, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And this arrangement was initiated by Maya's biological mother, who left the child with you and subsequently departed?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you attempt to contact other family members to return the child to her biological mother or to her grandparents?" Patricia had prepared me for this question. I took a breath. "I contacted my parents the morning after Maya was left with me. I asked for their help. My mother told me that Maya was my burden and that I should consider it practice for my nursing career. She refused to take her or to provide any assistance." I heard a sharp intake of breath from my mother's side of the room. I didn't look. "And your sister? Did you attempt to return the child to her?" Danielle disappeared. For the first several months, I didn't know where she was. Eventually, my parents told me she was traveling, finding herself. She didn't provide a forwarding address or contact information. The first time I heard from her directly was 8 years later when she called to tell me she was getting married. 8 years, Judge Morrison repeated. He made a note. My father's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor, my clients would like to present evidence that Ms. Turner actively discouraged contact between their clients and the child." "In a moment," Judge Morrison said. "I'd like to hear from Ms. Turner first." He turned back to me. "Were you aware that your parents wished to have a relationship with their grandchild?" "No, Your Honor. In 15 years, they never visited, never sent birthday cards or holiday gifts, never asked to video chat or see photographs. When I sent them updates, they responded minimally and changed the subject. I had no indication that they had any interest in Maya until I received this petition." "And you never sought formal guardianship or adoption?" This was the question I dreaded. Patricia had warned me it would come. "No, Your Honor. At the time I was 23 years old, in nursing school, barely able to afford food and rent. I didn't have the resources for a lawyer, and I suppose—" I paused, choosing my words carefully, and I suppose I kept hoping that someone would come back, that Danielle would return, or that my parents would want to be involved. By the time I realized that wasn't going to happen, Maya was already in school, and our life was stable, and I didn't want to rock the boat. I should have formalized things. I understand that now. Judge Morrison studied me for a long moment. Then he turned to my parents' side of the room. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner, you claim that Ms. Turner has systematically alienated you from your grandchild. Yet by your own records, you made no attempt to contact the child or establish a relationship for 14 years. Can you explain this discrepancy? My father's lawyer started to speak, but Judge Morrison held up his hand. I'd like to hear from the Turners themselves. My father stood. He was older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his posture less commanding, but his voice still carried the same authority I'd grown up hearing. Your Honor, the situation was complicated. Our daughter Danielle was going through a difficult time. We believed she would return for the child once she was stabilized. In the meantime, we trusted Nora to care for Maya temporarily. We never intended for the arrangement to become permanent, and we never gave up our rights as grandparents. But you made no attempt to exercise those rights, Judge Morrison said. No visits, no calls, no legal action until now, 15 years later. Why? My father hesitated. For the first time since I'd entered the courtroom, he looked uncertain. We believed, that is, Danielle led us to understand. What did she lead you to understand, Mr. Turner? My mother stood now, her voice sharp. Danielle told us that Nora was making it difficult, that she was possessive of the child, that any attempts to visit would cause conflict. We didn't want to disrupt Maya's life. And you believe this? Judge Morrison asked. Without ever attempting to verify it? Without ever contacting Ms. Turner directly to discuss the situation? The silence stretched. My parents looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. We trusted our daughter, my mother finally said. We trusted Danielle's account of the situation. Patricia stood then, and I could see the careful control in her posture. This was the moment we'd prepared for. Your Honor, my client has documentation that significantly contradicts the Turner's account of events. With the court's permission, I'd like to submit these materials. She handed a sealed folder to the bailiff, who carried it to Judge Morrison. I watched him open it, watched his face as he read the first page, the second, the third. Watched his expression shift from neutral to focus to something that looked almost like disbelief. He looked up at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, he said slowly, are you aware of the contents of your daughter Danielle's email correspondence over the past decade? My mother's face went pale. I don't, my father began, because I have here emails suggesting that Danielle maintained regular contact with you throughout the period in question. Emails in which she expressed gratitude that, and I'm quoting here, Nora's handling everything so we don't have to. Emails in which you discussed the possibility of eventually reclaiming Maya, if and when it became advantageous. The courtroom had gone very still. I also have records of financial transfers, Judge Morrison continued. It appears that you provided Danielle with significant monetary support over the years, support that was explicitly conditioned on her not complicating things with Maya. He set down the folder and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, Ms. Turner. He looked at Danielle, who had gone white. Do any of you have anything to say about these documents? Nobody spoke. Judge Morrison turned to me. Ms. Turner, do they even know what you have? I looked at my parents, at Danielle, at the family that had abandoned me and Maya, and now sat exposed in their own words. No, Your Honor, I said. I don't think they do. The full contents of that folder took nearly an hour to review in court. Patricia had organized them chronologically, building a narrative that dismantled every claim my parents had made. There were Danielle's early letters to me, the ones I'd saved, where she'd explicitly stated she couldn't care for Maya and needed me to take over. There were records of my phone calls with my parents, where they'd refused to help and told me Maya was my burden. There were the emails I discovered on Danielle's account, years of correspondence between her and my parents discussing me and Maya, as if we were characters in a story they were narrating rather than people with our own lives. Nora's always been the responsible one, my mother had written when Maya was 3. Let her handle it. We'll step in when the time is right. Maya's college fund is growing nicely, my father had written when Maya was 8. By the time she's 18, we'll have options. Brian is well connected, Danielle had written when Maya was 12. If we play this right, Maya could be part of a very different lifestyle. And the emails from the past year, when they'd begun planning the custody petition. The lawyer says our best angle is alienation, my mother had written. Nora has kept Maya from us. We tried to be involved, but she made it impossible. What about the years we didn't contact them? Danielle had asked. We'll say we believed Nora was handling things and didn't want to interfere. The court's like grandparents who seem reasonable. And the money? What if Nora finds out about the money? She won't. She's never been sophisticated about these things. She probably doesn't even know how to access your accounts. But I had accessed them. Not illegally. Danielle had saved her passwords in a document on my computer, and I'd found them when she left her laptop at my apartment during that visit when Maya was 10. I'd looked knowing it was a violation, driven by an intuition I couldn't name, and I'd found what they thought I'd never find. There's more, I said, when Judge Morrison asked if I had anything to add. Patricia handed me another set of documents. These were the ones I'd almost not included, the ones that hurt the most because they revealed the full depth of what I'd never wanted to believe. When Maya was 7, I said, my grandmother passed away, my mother's mother. I wasn't close to her. I'd only met her a few times, but she left me a small inheritance, about $12,000. Judge Morrison nodded. Go on. I never received that money. My mother told me there had been a mistake with the will, that the funds had been tied up in legal complications. I didn't question it. I was too busy and I trusted her. I held up a document. This is a copy of my grandmother's actual will. She left $12,000 to me and $50,000 to Danielle. But there's a codicil, added 2 months before her death, that redirected my portion to the care and maintenance of my great-granddaughter, Maya Rose Turner. Judge Morrison took the document. My grandmother wanted that money to go to Maya. She knew about Maya. She knew I was raising her alone, and she tried to help. I looked at my mother. But the money was deposited into an account that my parents controlled, an account they established in Maya's name, without my knowledge, which they have been using to fund their own expenses. The account currently has a balance of $600. The original $50,000, plus my $12,000, plus the interest, is gone. My mother's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. These documents haven't been properly authenticated. They're bank records, Patricia said calmly, obtained through legal discovery. The account is in Maya's name, established with my client's parents as custodians. The withdrawal records are clear. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, he said finally, is this true? Did you establish an account for your grandchild and subsequently deplete it for your own purposes? My father's face had gone red. My mother was gripping his arm, her knuckles white. The account was for family expenses, my father said. Maya is family. The money was used for her benefit. Maya never received any benefit from that money, I said. I've raised her on my nursing salary. I've never received a cent from my parents or from Danielle. Every school supply, every pair of shoes, every doctor's visit, I paid for all of it. Whatever they spent that money on, it wasn't Maya. The judge called a recess. I sat in the hallway with Patricia while my parents conferred with their lawyers in the courtroom. Through the window, I could see my mother crying, my father pacing, Danielle staring at the floor. How did you know? Patricia asked quietly. About the account, about the emails. You gathered all this evidence over years, but you told me you didn't know you were preparing for a legal battle. I thought about the question. It was a good one. I didn't know, I said, not consciously, but I think some part of me always understood who they were, what they were capable of. And that part of me kept records, just in case. You protected yourself without realizing you needed protection. I protected Maya. That's what I've always done. Patricia nodded. She didn't seem surprised. Maybe after years of family law, nothing surprised her anymore. There's something else, I said. Something I haven't shown you. I reached into my bag and pulled out one final document. I debated whether to include it, whether to reveal this last piece of the puzzle. It felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But they had tried to take my daughter. They had lied to a court. They had claimed I was the villain when I was the only one who had ever shown up. Patricia read the document. Her eyes widened. Where did you get this? Danielle mentioned it once years ago when she was drunk during that visit. She said something about the settlement and then clammed up. I didn't understand at the time, but I did some research, made some calls, found a court record that was supposed to be sealed. Patricia was quiet. This isn't just about custody anymore, she said. This is... I know. Are you sure you want to use it? I looked toward the courtroom door, thought about Maya, waiting in that other room with Dr. Chen, trusting me to make this right. They came after my daughter, I said. They lied, they stole, they manipulated. and they thought I was too unsophisticated to fight back. I met Patricia's eyes. I want them to understand exactly who they're dealing with. When court resumed, I asked to speak. Judge Morrison looked tired but curious. Miss Turner? Your Honor, I have one final document I'd like to submit. It pertains to the question of why my parents waited 15 years to seek custody of Maya. My parents' lawyer objected, citing lack of prior disclosure, but Judge Morrison overruled him. I'll allow it. At this point, I think we need the complete picture. I handed the document to the bailiff. 15 years ago, I said, my sister Danielle was engaged to a man named Marcus Webb. He left her 3 weeks after Maya was born. That's the story she told me, and the story she told the court. I paused. The room was silent. What she didn't tell anyone was that Marcus didn't just leave. He was paid to leave. My parents gave him $50,000 to walk away from Danielle and Maya, to disappear, to never seek custody or visitation, to never be a complicating factor. Danielle made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, almost a gasp. They did this because Marcus was not the kind of man they wanted in their family. He was, I checked my notes, recovering from addiction. His family had a difficult history. My parents considered him unsuitable and took steps to remove him from the picture. I looked at Judge Morrison. The document I've submitted is the settlement agreement, signed by Marcus Webb, witnessed by my parents' attorney, dated 3 weeks before Danielle left Maya with me. Judge Morrison read the document. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Ms. Turner, he said slowly, are you suggesting that your parents orchestrated the circumstances that led to Maya being placed in your care? I'm suggesting that they created a situation where Danielle had no support, no partner, no safety net, no one to help her. And when she inevitably collapsed under the pressure, they told me to handle it. They watched me struggle for 15 years, never helping, never intervening. And now that Maya is almost 18, now that she's about to age out of their control, they've suddenly remembered that they're her grandparents. I turned to my parents. You didn't want her when she was a baby who needed feeding and changing and raising. You didn't want her when she was a child who needed school supplies and doctor's visits and someone to show up at her plays. But now that she's almost an adult, now that she might be useful or valuable or capable of inheriting something, now you want her. My mother stood. That's not, you can't. Mrs. Turner, sit down, Judge Morrison said sharply when she sat. I wasn't sophisticated enough to fight back, I continued. That's what you wrote in your emails. I was too busy, too tired, too focused on actually raising Maya to notice what you were doing. But I noticed. I noticed everything, and I kept records because some part of me always knew this day would come. I looked at Judge Morrison. Your Honor, I'm not asking for revenge. I'm not asking you to punish my parents or my sister for what they've done. I'm simply asking you to let Maya stay with the only mother she's ever known. The one who showed up every day, even when no one else did. The one who chose her, not because she was obligated, but because that's what love means. The silence after I finished speaking lasted for what felt like minutes. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents before him. He made notes. He consulted with the court clerk about something I couldn't hear. Then he asked to speak with Maya. I'd like to hear from the child, he said. Dr. Chen, would you bring her in? Maya entered the courtroom looking nervous but composed. She was wearing the dress we'd bought together for her 8th grade graduation, a blue one that she'd said made her feel professional. She walked to the witness stand without looking at my parents or Danielle. Maya, Judge Morrison said gently, do you understand why we're all here today? Yes, sir. My grandparents want custody of me. That's right, and I need to understand what you want. Where would you like to live? Maya didn't hesitate. With my mom, with Nora. Can you tell me why? Maya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. Because she's my mom. Because she's the one who's always been there. When I was little and had nightmares, she was the one who came to my room. When I was scared about starting school, she walked me in every day until I was ready to go alone. When I got sick, she stayed up all night. When I won the art award last year, she was in the front row, taking pictures. She looked at my parents for the first time. I don't know these people. They've never visited me. They've never called me. I didn't even know they existed until this lawsuit. Why would I want to live with strangers? Your biological mother, Judge Morrison said carefully. Do you have feelings about her? Maya's expression flickered. She gave birth to me. I know that. We've talked a few times, but she's not my mom. She left when I was 6 weeks old. Nora stayed. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. My mom stayed every single day, even when it was hard, even when she could have given up. She stayed. Judge Morrison made his ruling that afternoon. He denied my parents' petition for custody. He granted me formal guardianship of Maya, with a path to adoption if we chose to pursue it. He ordered my parents to return the funds they had taken from Maya's account, with interest. And he referred the settlement agreement with Marcus Webb to the state bar for investigation, suggesting that the attorney involved might have committed ethical violations. This court exists to protect the best interests of children, he said in his closing remarks. And the best interests of Maya Rose Turner are clear. She has been raised by a dedicated, loving parent who sacrificed her own comfort to provide for her. She has stability, support, and a future full of promise. This court will not disrupt that based on the belated claims of family members who demonstrated, through their own correspondence, that their interest in this child is recent, opportunistic, and fundamentally self-serving. He looked at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Turner. Ms. Turner. He addressed Danielle. I don't know what led you to pursue this case, and I don't particularly care. What I do know is that you caused unnecessary trauma to a child and her mother, and you wasted this court's time with claims you knew to be false. I'm recommending that the state bar review your conduct in this matter, and I'm issuing a formal finding that your petition was brought in bad faith. He gathered his papers. This case is dismissed. Ms. Turner, he looked at me, take your daughter home. We went home. The apartment seemed smaller than usual, or maybe I just felt larger, expanded by the day's events, by the weight of everything that had been said and revealed. Maya sat at the kitchen table while I made tea, both of us quiet, processing. Mom, she said finally. Yeah, sweetheart? The things they said in court about paying that guy to leave, about the money, about planning to take me. I set down the kettle and sat across from her. Yes, all of that was true. She was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? Before, I mean. Why didn't you tell me who they really were? I considered the question carefully. Because you were a child, and because I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that maybe they had reasons I didn't understand, or that they would change, or that I was just being paranoid. I didn't want it to poison you against your family based on my own suspicions. But your suspicions were right. They were right. Maya stared at the table, her fingers tracing the wood grain. What happens now? With them, I mean. I don't know. They might have to pay back the money. The lawyer who helped them might get in trouble. But beyond that, still your biological grandparents. And they're still Danielle's parents. That doesn't change even if our relationship with them does. Do I have to see them again? Ever? No. You don't have to see anyone you don't want to see. That's your choice? She nodded slowly. Then she looked up at me, and something in her expression shifted. From the worried teenager who'd walked into that courtroom to something older, more resolved. You know what I keep thinking about? The judge asked me where I wanted to live. Like it was even a question. Like there was any universe where I would choose people I've never met over you. He had to ask. It's the law. I know, but it made me realize. She paused, searching for words. All those years I used to wonder about my birth mother, why she left, whether she thought about me, whether I was missing some piece of myself because I didn't know her. That's natural. Of course you wondered. But today, sitting in that courtroom, listening to everything, I realized I wasn't missing anything. The piece I thought was missing, it was never missing. It was always here, with you. I felt my eyes fill with tears. Maya reached across the table and took my hand. You're my mom, she said. You've always been my mom, and nothing they said or did or tried to do changes that. I cried then, really cried for the first time in years. Maya came around the table and held me the way I'd held her through so many of her own tears, and we sat together in the kitchen while the tea went cold and the afternoon light faded. There was more to come, paperwork and legal proceedings and the slow, grinding work of holding my parents accountable for what they'd done. There would be difficult conversations and lingering questions and probably some sleepless nights ahead. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that my daughter was home, safe, mine. What mattered was that 15 years of showing up had led to this, a child who knew without question where she belonged. 3 months later, I formally adopted Maya. We stood before a different judge in a different courtroom. This one decorated with balloons and streamers because the family court did adoptions on Friday afternoons and tried to make them festive. Maya wore a dress she'd chosen herself, something colorful and dramatic that was completely unlike the professional blue from the custody hearing. Today, the judge said, smiling at both of us, we're making official what has been true in practice for 15 years. Maya Rose Turner will become Maya Rose Turner, legally and forever the daughter of Nora Louise Turner. Maya laughed. It's the same name, but now it's official, the judge said. Now no one can ever question it. I signed the papers. Maya signed the papers. Mrs. Patterson was there as a witness, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Chloe and her family were there, cheering. Even Dr. Chen, the court advocate from the custody hearing, had come to see the happy ending. Afterward, we went to dinner at Maya's favorite restaurant, a ridiculous place with neon lights and over-the-top decorations that I normally would have vetoed. But today was her day, and I would have agreed to almost anything. Mom, she said, halfway through her dessert. Do you think they'll ever try again? To contact us, I mean, Grandma and Grandpa, Danielle. I thought about my parents, who had been silent since the ruling, about Danielle, who had sent me one email, apologizing in vague terms for how things went, and then disappeared again, about the lawyer who was now facing an ethics investigation, and the money that was slowly being recovered. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe people don't always change, but sometimes circumstances make them behave differently. We'll deal with whatever comes. And if they try to make trouble again, I smiled, then we'll handle it. Together. Maya is 17 now, a senior in high school, applying to art colleges, dreaming about a future as an illustrator. Her room is covered in sketchbooks and canvases, and she's already won 2 regional competitions for her work. She knows the whole story, all of it, including the parts I wished I could have protected her from. We've talked about it many times, in pieces, as she's grown old enough to understand the complexities of family and obligation and choice. Do you regret it? She asked me once. Taking me in, giving up whatever life you would have had. I didn't have to think about my answer. I didn't give up anything, I said. I gained everything. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Maya. Not in spite of how you came to me, but including it. Every hard night, every sacrifice, every moment of exhaustion, it all led to you, to who you are, to who we are together. She hugged me then, the way she did when she was small, her face pressed against my shoulder. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. My parents are still alive, still married, still living in the house I grew up in, surrounded by the artifacts of a life I no longer recognize as connected to mine. We don't speak. They didn't contest the court's ruling about the money, and the investigation into their lawyer resulted in a formal reprimand, but no disbarment. They've made no further attempts to contact Maya or me. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what they tell themselves about how things went. Whether they've rewritten the narrative to make themselves the victims. Whether they believe their own story. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. Danielle sends Maya a birthday card every year. Just a card. No gift, no letter, nothing substantial. Maya reads them with a kind of detached curiosity. The way you might read a postcard from a distant acquaintance. She's getting married again, Maya told me last year, reading Danielle's latest card. To some guy named Thomas. She invited me to the wedding. Do you want to go? Maya considered it briefly, then shook her head. No, I don't know her. She doesn't know me. A wedding won't change that. She tossed the card in the recycling and went back to her homework. I still have the box in my closet. The one with all the documents, the letters, the evidence I gathered over 15 years without knowing why. Sometimes I take it out and look through it. Not to relive the pain, but to remember what we survived. To remind myself of what I did and why and how. The sealed folder's in there too, the one I gave to the judge. Patricia returned it to me after the case was closed. It's worn now. The edge is soft from handling, but the contents are still intact. Evidence of betrayal, evidence of manipulation, evidence of a family that treated a child as an inconvenience and her caregiver as a servant. but also evidence of something else. Evidence that I showed up, that I stayed, that I fought for my daughter with everything I had. Evidence that love, in the end, was stronger than blood. There's a photograph on my refrigerator. It's from Maya's 10th birthday. The first one after I told her about Danielle. She'd been quiet that whole day processing, and I'd worried that I'd chosen the wrong time to have that conversation. But when we got to the ice cream shop for her party, she grabbed my hand and pulled me close. "Mom," she said, "can we take a picture, just us?" The shop owner obliged, snapping a shot of us grinning at the camera. Ice cream cones in hand, Maya's face smeared with chocolate. It's not a perfect picture. The lighting is bad, and we both look tired, and you can see the worry lines around my eyes that have only deepened in the years since. But it's real. It's us. It's evidence of a family that wasn't given but built, one day at a time, through showing up and staying and choosing each other. I look at that photograph every morning when I make coffee. It reminds me of something important, something I try to tell Maya whenever she'll listen. Family isn't about who left you. It's about who stayed. The morning after the adoption was finalized, Maya and I sat on our small balcony, watching the sun come up. The city was quiet, still wrapped in early darkness, and the sky was streaked with gold and pink. "Mom?" Maya said. "Yeah?" "Thank you." I looked at her, this beautiful, complicated, extraordinary person who had been given to me like a gift I didn't know I needed. For what, sweetheart? For everything. For taking me in, for fighting for me, for being here every single day, even when it was hard. I took her hand. "You don't have to thank me for that. That's just what parents do." She shook her head. "No, that's what you do. That's what you've always done. And I'm grateful. Every day. I'm grateful that you're my mom." We sat together in the growing light, and I thought about all the years that had led to this moment. The sleepless nights, the financial struggles, the loneliness, the fear, the anger at a family that had abandoned us both, but also the joy, the laughter, the drawings taped to every surface of our apartment, the school plays and birthday parties and ice cream runs, the ordinary, extraordinary miracle of watching a child grow up. It hadn't been the life I'd planned. It hadn't been easy or simple or anything like what I'd imagined for myself at 23, but it had been mine, ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Years from now, when Maya has her own life, her own career, maybe her own family, I hope she'll remember this. Not the custody battle or the courtroom drama or the revelations about her biological family. Just this, that she was loved, fiercely, unconditionally, completely. That someone showed up for her every single day, without being asked and without keeping score. That family isn't about what you're born into, it's about what you build. And that some burdens, once you've carried them long enough, stop feeling like burdens at all. They just feel like love. For Maya, who was never a burden, who was always, from the very first moment, exactly where she was supposed to be. All my love, forever, Mom.